Well, good morning. We're coming to the conclusion of the life of Ruth as we have it recorded. I'm not going to go into the details of the actions that were taken by Ruth and Boaz, simply to say that there were certain rules and regulations in their society at that time that had been laid down in the law, and Boaz adhered to all of them. And he did not take advantage of Ruth before she could legally marry him. And that was a wonderful thing. He was a very powerful man. He could easily have taken pleasure with Ruth without committing himself to marriage. And whether our society likes it or not, marriage is God's perfect plan for people if they're going to want to live together and have intimate relations. There is nothing in Scripture that blesses sexual activity outside of the marriage bond between a man and a woman. Sorry if that bursts anybody's bubble, but if you're living in a relationship that doesn't conform to that pattern, if you have a relationship with someone and you're not married to them, then stop and get it sorted out. It won't bring you blessing. It's not that I'm being cruel or anything, it's just simply it won't bring you blessing. Any sexual activity outside of the bond between a man and a woman in marriage will not be blessed by God. It's not his way. He made man and woman to marry and be monogamous with each other. Can't pronounce that word properly, but you know what I mean. Committed to each other. Because there's so much he teaches us through that wonderful relationship. And we get to the end of Ruth here, in Ruth 4 verse 13. It says, "So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi," that was Ruth's mother-in-law, of course, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without next of kin. May his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom, and she became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi," and they named him Obed. That's interesting. Here, Ruth bore the child, and this was interesting because the rules of the law said that if a woman was widowed, then her next of kin, her husband's next of kin, her husband's brother, the nearest kinsman to her husband, should take her, and any child that was born would be recognized as a descendant of her husband, her first husband, her dead husband, so that his name would carry on in the annals of Israel. But of course Naomi was not married to Boaz. It was Naomi's daughter-in-law. And really, the child should have been recognized as her son's son, not as her son. It's a bit complicated, but anyway. But he was the provision for Elimelech, really. So it's lovely, this assessment of Ruth, who loves you, your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons. What a wonderful relationship between 2 women of different generations. And this is our commitment to each other, to those the Lord has put close to us. Should be a devoted relationship. And too often we take for granted those who are of our own household, and we don't treat them the way we would treat a visitor if they came in. We treat them sometimes with a lot of disrespect, and we need to keep our relationships good, especially those who are living in the same household with us. But I just wanted to look at, as a final thought for today, at Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. It's the genealogy of Jesus, starting from Abraham, going down to Jesus. Well, yeah, down to Joseph and then to Jesus. And it says in verse 5, Salmon, the father of Boaz, by Rahab, and Boaz, the father of Obed by Ruth. Now Salmon, we don't read a lot of, and very much about him at all. He's just a name in the genealogy. But he married Rahab. Rahab was the harlot who hid the spies in Jericho when Joshua was spying out the land and was going to go into Jericho and take it. But Rahab, she was not a Jew. She was a harlot. She was a prostitute in that city, but she believed in Joshua and in the Lord, the God of Israel. She knew her city would fall to Joshua and his army, and she hid the spies, and she was kept alive by Joshua and his troops. And she came into the people of Israel as a foreigner, just like Ruth did. And she became the mother of Boaz. This Boaz, who married Ruth, who also was not part of the people of Israel. She was a Moabitess. She came in from the outside. And these two women, who were not very important women at all, they were not leaders, not married or son or daughter, prince or princess. They were not important women, but they were women who had recognized the Lord for who he was. They'd seen what was happening in the life of the Israelites, and they had decided to join the Lord's people. And they were blessed enough to be part of the genealogy of Jesus himself. I think that's wonderful. You know, God's plan right from the beginning was that all people should come to faith, Gentiles as well as Jews. And he chose the Jewish nation to reach the world, through whom to reach the world. And his intention always was that the message of his love would go to everyone, and that no one would ever be an outsider. Ruth became a very important person in God's vision for the future. So that verse it's a genealogy, isn't it? But it's so important because it names, and in the whole of this list, it only names one or two other women in the genealogy of Jesus. Tamar is one, and you can look up the life of Tamar if you like. But the rest are just the men. And then, of course, Bathsheba is not named by name, but as the wife of Uriah. She is in this genealogy. But these important women were necessary and so blessed. But these two in particular were from outside the people of Israel. And I think it's wonderful. So the last verse of Ruth says, now these were the descendants of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron, Hezron of Ram, Ram of Aminadab, Aminadab of Nahshon, Nahshon of Salmon, Salmon of Boaz, Boaz of Obed, Obed of Jesse, and Jesse of David. So Ruth was the great-grandmother of David. Naomi was the step great-great-grandmother of David. This is a very important setting for the scene, and it also gives us a timeline for roughly when David occurred, because we know when Joshua invaded Israel and when Jericho was taken and when Rahab became part. It's all wonderful history, and it links. Genealogies are wonderful to see who's related to who and how and what role they had in the history of Israel. My time is long up. I hope you stayed with me. If not, I'll see you tomorrow anyway. God bless you. Bye-bye.